following program does not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the City of Oceanside, its elected officials, KOCT, its board of directors, or staff.
This program brought to you by the caring hands of Tri-City Medical Center.
Welcome to this edition of The Voice of Oceanside, the longest-running talk show in San Diego County. My guest for today's show is the new director for the Oceanside Museum of Art, Daniel Foster. The OMA, as many people call it, is one of the greatest success stories in Oceanside and in North County. A museum started by local citizens that has become a major player in the arts community. Welcome to the Voice of Oceanside.
Yeah, it's really good to be here and good to be in Oceanside.
Absolutely. Welcome to the community. Mm-hmm. What I'd like to do, and we don't often have this opportunity because Oceanside has the characteristics of very long-term residents.
Yes,
frequently, we're dealing with old friends. I'd like to know a little bit about your background and what brought you here.
Southern California, born and raised, grew up in the Valley and Woodland Hills, went to UCSD at 18 and studied philosophy and science and business, ultimately going to USC Business School and their entrepreneur program. And then I was about to start some businesses in the golf industry, actually, and other things that I had developed, and I had an epiphany moment where I made a work of art which I hadn't been focusing on in my childhood at all, didn't think of myself as an artist at all, had some blank walls, no money, thought I could splatter paint like Jackson Pollock, and I started to put my hand to making some art just to fill some walls. And the next thing I knew, I was tapping into this very soulful, deep voice of what's important in life and how art is this wonderful vehicle to communicating these ideas. And so I had a struggle between the traditional kind of yuppie oldest child. My father's a MIT, Harvard nuclear physicist, mother raising me as the oldest child and my brother as a homemaker. And I had this struggle in my 20s. Am I going to go off and do what everyone expected me to do with good education and opportunities, or am I going to go off into the unknown that I didn't know in my childhood and discover that inner voice as being an artist? And I chose the latter. I wasn't married, didn't have any real responsibilities, and figured I can always return to that professional business world if I want at some point in time down the road. And I started to explore art. And at that time, I was in San Diego. I was working to put rent on the table, food on the table at San Diego Art Institute, which ultimately for 10 years I was the director of education there for programs for the arts community here in San Diego in the late 80s and all throughout the 90s, other than a few years in San Francisco where I got my master's degree at the San Francisco Art Institute. I also worked at UCSD in their art department, University Art Gallery, and also studied there as a student with the best faculty that was teaching, the veteran faculty, the Alan Capros, Italo Sconga, Ernie Silva, Kim McConnells. I was, being an artist primary, working in the arts community as an arts professional. About 10 years ago, the opportunity to run the Riverside Art Museum out in the Inland Empire came along, and I went that way. And for the last 10 years, I was doing two things, running an important regional art museum like the Oceanside Museum of Art, but also running as the president and CEO of the Community Foundation for Riverside San Bernardino counties, which was the largest philanthropic foundation, giving out about $5 million to all kinds of quality of life causes. Quite a departure from the art world, actually, and very much putting my USC business kind of background to bear in that, and understanding, having been a nonprofit guy my whole life and a big volunteer in a lot of programs in communities, I started to understand really what community is about. What is that intersection between the public elected cities and counties, the business community, and the nonprofit community, and how we all actually have an angle, a point of view, and a strength to bear on how we really make strong, healthy communities. And those 4 years running that community foundation was one of the most phenomenal educations and experiences I've had. We grew our assets from 40 to 60 million. We developed all kinds of initiatives in education and safety net and arts and culture and so forth. But I have long admired the Oceanside Museum of Art over its 15-year history, being an arts and culture guy through my career. I knew Skip Hall, the founding director, and a number of the important board members over the years, and had kept contact with them. And I'm always looking for new opportunities, new chapters. And so there was a moment this last year where that opportunity came knocking, and it just seemed like the right time and place for me to make a change of life and into a great, rich, historical community like Oceanside, great diversity here, a great regional art museum that is young and has tremendous potential. And I would say, in my observation of Southern California history, when you look at the Pasadenas, the Santa Anas, the Riversides, the Culver Cities, the gas lamps that were dilapidated downtowns, not the place you'd want to be day or night 30 years ago, but completely revitalized, how did that happen? It's arts, culture, and entertainment, which was the catalyzing driver of revitalization and economic prosperity. And part of the reason why I've come to Oceanside, outside of the obvious, run a great regional art museum, is to be party to the visioning and the future of this city, of what I think can happen. I think the city has got an amazing potential over the next 5-10 years, and I want to be a part of that.
Well, I know you have a long-term view, and now it's easy to understand how you developed this view, given your background, that art and business and government are really intersected in a deeper way than most of us think of.
Yep.
Before we get to that, and I think that's intriguing, let's address let's say, the traditional story to begin with. There's a couple elements to the Oceanside Museum that are a little bit different than others. Let's start with the architecture. The building itself has
historic 1934 building,
value.
Irving Gill. Irving Gill's the great architect of architecture back 70, 80 years ago, and that was the historic City Hall in 1934 building. And when the city and the community had this idea that arts and culture is important in the future and we need a quality museum, they chose an amazing starting point of that architectural building on the campus of the city civic center in downtown Oceanside. Then the community and the board and the patrons of this community said, we need to take this 5,000 square foot building, very small and not really capacity to do what it needed to do, and we need to grow it to about 30,000 square feet. So Frederick Fisher, one of the nationally recognized great architects operating out of LA, was brought in and did a masterful, modernist renovation and expansion of that building, and that opened about 4 years ago. So what we have is a tremendous architectural gem of a building, and architecture is, of course, one of the great art forms, so it's important to have that. And our capacity to do 25 exhibitions a year, 5-6 exhibitions at one time, the way we're right now configured. But in my early arrival here, I'm looking at that building and realizing we're a 3-level building. And right now the public only has access to the main floor, entry floor, and the upstairs. But downstairs is where we've got a lot of space that the public probably has never seen. And we're going to start developing at least one gallery and an education classroom down there so that visitors to our building will experience a 3-level experience. It'll also obviously expand our ability to program and better serve the community.
Actually, that's another point of intersection beyond government and business. We're talking about the educational aspect of it. Do you expect that you'll be able to create a noticeable increase in the interaction between local schools and the museum over the upcoming years?
We're at that very good starting point where we are touching every 5th grader in Oceanside Unified School District with our youth program, and that's a good starting point. And 5th grade's an important seminal moment of bringing arts into their experience, but all grades are important to have the arts, and they're not getting it under these hard times in the education system. So if anything, I think the mandate on the community cultural organizations step into that void and to get access and hands-on experience and exposure to museums and cultural institutions. 40% of our youth that are in our programs have never been to a museum before. And we find that one catalyzing visit to our museum where their eyes are wide open, they're experiencing the value of art and museums, can produce a lifelong art appreciator and lover. And so I think it's important to have your arts in your life. It's important on a pure human, intimate, almost spiritual level for people to have that. But I think it's very important for the academic development and professional development of our workforce to understand the value of the arts. The arts is really the place historically where creativity and innovation is being practiced. And oftentimes, historically, it's been in isolation from the other professions of the world. But the world is changing. The 21st century is this hybridization where innovation and adaptability to change are the key skill sets for the future workforce. And where are all of those professions going to learn it? They're going to learn it from the lessons that the arts world has figured out for centuries.
Speaking of change, do you have a top 3 or maybe even a top 10 list of what you want to see happen? We've already covered one. Mm-hmm. Greatly expanded interconnection with education. Yeah. So what else are you looking at as you embark on this new challenge?
Well, the challenge of any regional art museum is to serve the diversity of audiences in the community and to not be a one-trick pony museum that serves just a small fraction of your community. That is what a regional art museum is to do, to serve the whole population. And the population has many different kinds of tastes, and conservative, traditional tastes, and really cutting-edge, conceptual, modern tastes. And so that's the trick, and that's the excitement of a regional art museum, is how do you program intentionally, strategically around all of the interests of your community. And then I actually think the exciting part is not just to program in compartmentalized ways with different audiences you're here to serve and do it in a really high qualitative, educational, kind of scholarly way, but then we have the ability physically to bring audiences that don't rub elbows together, rarely in the community, together to start rubbing elbows when we have 5 shows at one time and we're opening all of those shows, and those audiences that never rub elbows hardly together can come together and actually experience what they love and we're coming for, but then be experiencing new things that they normally wouldn't go out of their way, and then start to develop an appreciation for new ideas, new peoples, diversity of approaches, all of that.
You know, we're coming up on our break. I want to ask a question before the break, okay. And at least in my mind, this is a complicated question. Mm-hmm. That's a great concept of bringing together these diverse groups. However, a museum probably has a pretty significant heavy user half. In other words, the people who go there regularly really go there regularly. Mm-hmm. They're familiar with it. Yeah. What I see in your goal is to bring more people in, and that's going to mean bringing people in for the first time. Mm-hmm. And what I'd like to do is when we come back from the break, to set some expectations as to what people can expect to see and do when they come to a regional museum. Because obviously people who haven't been there don't know what to expect, and maybe that's what's keeping them away. Yep. So we'll talk about that when we come back.
Very good.
Stay with us. We'll be gone for a short break, and the second half of Voice of Oceanside will be interesting. So stay with us.
They do not have to die, but they do.
24,000 children
every day.
They die for reasons we can prevent.
Like not getting enough food or medicine.
Or clean, safe water to drink.
But we are gaining ground. A generation ago, twice as many children were dying.
Still, 24,000 every day?
I believe.
I believe.
I believe.
I believe. I believe.
Believe.
I believe that number should be 0. Believe in 0.
Oceanside Museum of Art is a cultural jewel located in downtown. OMA presents provocative contemporary exhibitions in Southern California and around the world. James Hubble's wide-ranging practice creates visually arresting work that evokes and engages the beauty of our natural environment. This exhibit runs from February 3rd to June 2nd, 2013. For more information about the Oceanside Museum of Art, call 760-435-3720.
Welcome back to the Voice of Oceanside. So to rephrase my question a little bit that we mentioned before the break, what you want to outreach and get more people. And one way to do that is to demystify what they might expect and create a set of expectations. So what can people expect from a regional museum?
Quality scholarship to educate the public about the talent of artists in the community and the importance of their ideas that they're dealing with that really address the core issues of community and our lives. And where else do you go find that? It's the museum's job to tee up those important discussions about what's important in life and important in our communities.
So it's not about just looking at something.
Well, I've often
thinking about
I've
things.
often thought art is essentially the pursuit of either beauty or truth. And beauty is not always truthful, and truth is not always beautiful. And I like to think of art in that way. So I think we're dealing with basically what is beautiful in our lives and what are the fundamental subjective truths of the diversity of people and ideas. What are those truths that is going on in our communities, and how can artists bring that forward to educate us and to develop a dialogue and an appreciation and understanding for what community really is in terms of its diversity.
If somebody visits today after seeing this show, for example, can you give me an example of what helps meet that goal that they would see this afternoon?
Well, for example, one of our great shows that we'll have early part of this year is James Hubble, a 6-decade veteran, 82-year-old gentleman, one of the best artists in San Diego history and nationally, internationally renowned for his art and his architecture. We've done a couple exhibitions with him in the past. We're going to highlight his sculpture, which the formal line and design that is iconic through everything he does, homes and stained glass and paintings. We're going to focus in on that. But he brings almost a soulful spiritual interpretation of nature into the materials he works with. So I think you not only will get this wonderful appreciation for the talent of the arts community in San Diego, but a particular artist who has, I think, back to the fundamentals, the timeless, permanent fundamental values of what life and nature are about. And so, to me, that's part of our role, is to bring those kind of artists forward and to engage our communities with them. But we also, in my mind, need to touch a lot of different approaches of art, and there's a plethora and almost infinite nature of all the ways that individual artists look at our communities and tee up the important discussions. So to me, our job is to produce exhibits that are of the highest scholarship and quality, of the highest talent to engage the public with, bring educational programs to help them interpret those programs to better understand them, and then to create events around all of that that attract people in as portal of entry to start to have that almost natural educational experience instead of a formal sit in a classroom kind of thing and learn it in a book.
And I know part of your goal is when we say entry, it doesn't mean entering your building. You're looking at doing some outreach.
Yeah, thank you. I feel we're really technically a 17-year-old nonprofit organization that opened about 15 years ago. And our talent and resources of our great board and our staff and our volunteers and patrons have been focused on the building and getting out of the ground and putting into place what we have now, and we have a lot. But we haven't been focused on the external world, the outreach, the visibility, the collaborations, the leadership influence within the regional arts community. And I think that's going to be a lion's share of my job, and the future of our organization's leadership is to move in that direction as part of our evolution, our maturing as a regional player in arts and culture, and becoming discovered and reaching out to the entire community. And I also feel we're more than a building. Art is not just to be put in a building on 4 walls, come to us and experience an artful experience and then go home and do your normal thing. Art should be saturated into the consciousness and the public spaces throughout all of our communities. And I think it's our job to bring public art and to bring awareness of all the art forms into design of architecture and urban planning, into the thinking that Oceanside has of its future, of its waterfront and its downtown. We don't have to just put a bench right there on the street. We can create some artful interpretation along the way. So I think art should be really integrated into the fabric, the civic fabric, and the built landscape fabric of our communities. And
has any of that already started?
Yes, and there's some really good visioning that has been going on in the city, and it's a hard time economically to put money behind it, but that's going to resolve itself, and every city is addressing that, and the future is ultimately flying at us nonetheless. And so to me, I feel the problem historically is the arts world has tended to marginalize itself from the politics and the civic fabric of community. And they're not at the table where the important business leaders and the civic leaders are sitting there deciding the future of communities. And to me, that's the great failing historically of the arts community, but I see tremendous change and trends of arts community and leadership stepping up and saying, we can't be afraid of where the politics and the business of the community is going on. We've actually got to be right in there discussing and being partners in building that vision together. And that's what I've had background in doing, and I think when you do it in a collaborative way with the community, the larger non-arts community, you bring a lot to bear that is not at the table. And one of them is that what does everyone want in their community? They want quality jobs, particularly in Oceanside. The future of Oceanside is bringing in more high-income, quality, educated labor force for its diversification of its economy. What's going to attract those kind of individuals? Not just the capability of making a buck here in this community, because there's a lot of communities you can go do that. They're going to have to sell this to their spouses, their kids, and their high-paid executives that there's things to do on nights and weekends. It's a really good community to live in, and there's a great museum for us to go to, along with a lot of other cultural offerings. If we have that, we're competitive. If we don't have it, we're not competitive, and we're going to be a really constrained economy.
You know, you're taking an approach is almost the polar opposite, I think, of some mentalities that are basically saying that art is something we pay for with extra money that, you know, and if we really love it, we work harder and do that, and if we don't, we let the government do it. You're suggesting and have demonstrated that art can be at the table at the beginning and actually drive some of that wealth rather than just wait for it to happen and take a percentage. You're actually becoming a participant and increasing the size of the pie.
I think from a nuts and bolts kind of utility point of view about money, arts is a huge player in it. But I want to go back to the historical power of art to transform a life and to create values that actually create a healthy, strong, vibrant, happy life versus a utilitarian production unit kind of life. And I think that's the great value of art and always has been. Art's ability to become a voice for youth that are disenfranchised with education and the normal systems, and they don't know how to express themselves and they're at risk. That's already well documented. But actually, any person that brings art into their life, what they're bringing, I think, is core new values that the rest of the sectors of the community don't really offer as well as the arts community do. And I was on the path of a traditional professional path and happy to have had what most people, I think, wanted. But when I discovered art, that epiphany moment is when I discovered my soul and I discovered my heart. And I started to integrate it into the practical day-to-day activities of my life. And I can't imagine having my life without that in it, even though I probably would have had all the things that we traditionally are raised to want to strive for and have.
You know, when you talk about at-risk individuals, typically we're thinking of youth. And the buzzword with them now, of course, is technology. Is technology changing the actual definition of art?
It is, no doubt. You know, to me, what do artists do? They deal with the inner ideas and thoughts and observations of importance, and they try to attach it to the material world that we all engage in some ways, and technology included. So the technology is simply a tool that can be put in the hands of artists and is, and in fact in the hands of all of us, to be creative. And so no doubt technology always has, before what we think of technology to be right now and the exponential growth of technology that's going on in our lives. But technology has always changed things. Acrylics that came into being that created another avenue for painters beyond the traditional oil technique. So technology is always an important new tool and material for artists to work with that creates a better capability to connect with audiences.
You know, we've got a couple of minutes left, and I'd like you to highlight some of the upcoming programs and shows that people can expect?
Good. We're really going to be focusing a lot on San Diego and Southern California as a primary area of focus. We're going to develop much more educational programs, which I don't think have been built out. Our youth programs, they'll touch far beyond the fifth graders, and also we have a wonderful family art day that we offer on a quarterly basis to families and kids on Sundays. We also are going to develop adult education programs, lectures about art, panel discussions, critiques about art for artists. Artists need feedback. Museums are a good place for them to get the expertise on the feedback. We do a wonderful Art After Dark program that fills the museum and various kind of events on our calendar on our website, oma-online.org, that lays all of that out.
Is Art After Dark a regular program that occurs on a monthly basis?
On a quarterly basis, basically, and that's been a 4-year running program. And what I love about that is that the arts traditionally has catered to an older, more wealthier access audience historically. The younger audiences are not always caught into the museum institution. They tend to go to the grassroots level a lot. So we've been really intentional about programming for 20, 30-somethings, and it's our Art After Dark program that's been phenomenally successful program for that. And a lot of the audience that comes to that, the 700 or so that I was referring to, are a lot of young adults.
And finally, if someone has an interest that goes beyond just visiting, even on a regular basis, are there any opportunities for people to interact more closely as a volunteer?
Definitely, no doubt. We're a nonprofit. It's always a hard road to go in getting the resources to do ambitious ideas. We live off of the generosity of people contributing what they have to give. Those that have dollars to give, of course, are hugely important. Those businesses that give us in-kind donations are hugely important. And the community stepping in and say, do you need our help? And volunteering on anything. And we've got lots of opportunities to have volunteers come help us create our future and our growth that we so much need. We're still young. We're at a certain capacity. We're doing a lot with a limited amount of staff and resources. And the community stepping up with whatever they have to offer to help us with our job, our mission, is of great value and need to us.
Well, you've created an exciting fresh new vision, and I love the way you keep describing new, and that's great because sometimes people can get trapped. 15 years is, after all, a long time for some people, but that's a great enthusiasm. Welcome to Oceanside. Welcome to this show.
It's great to be here. I love this community.
And we'll look forward to having you back when these things become accomplishments as opposed to just dreams.
Great.
So,
look forward to it, John.
Thank you. And thanks for watching this edition of The Voice of Oceanside. Remember, The Voice is available for viewing at our website at koct.org.